As we start to add different scales to our musical repertoire, we need to have some way of convincing ourselves we have an appreciation for what's going on. And to do that, we need to remember what the basics of our music is really built around. Now, of course, I'm talking about Western music here, but we basically work with a 12-note scale. How did we get the 12 notes? Well, they're based on a harmonic series ratio of 3/2. We call that a perfect fifth or a fifth interval. That interval lets us find all the notes in an octave, and it turns out there's 12, 13 if you count the octave at the end. What does that look like or sound like? Well, if we start with a C note, we're going to go all the way up till we have a C note again. So that's our chromatic scale. And probably nothing is more boring than the chromatic scale, other than just doing kind of a step over note thing. So if we went to a C, miss a note, 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 and then we're back at C. What makes those boring is they're consistent across the entire set of notes. Although something does interesting come out of it, we can start asking ourselves what notes sound best and sound thus best together. And we'll start with our root note. In this case, I'm doing a C scale. The notes that sound best with that are, of course, the note C. Whether it's the C we start with, that would be the unison, or whether it's going to be up an octave, the octave up C. All right, so now we've got some notes that sound good. Are there other notes that sound good? Well, yeah, the other notes that sound good are the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. Now, perfect fifth sounds good because that's what we built all of our notes from anyway. And these two, we'll call them metrics or points or references, provide us with a pretty good idea of how to make our music sound good. And let's just remind ourselves, if we have a C note here, the perfect fourth is right below it. Perfect fifth is just up one step. And interestingly, the note that sounds the worst with our C, that's our tritone interval. It's exactly the halfway point of our string. And so that note's the one that maybe we don't want to have in our musical series. And that's kind of neat, because if we put this onto a 4-note per string interval and just play every other note, that's our tritone. So if we slide back one note, that's going to be our perfect fourth. If we skip over the perfect fifth, over the tritone, we get to the perfect fifth. And we can find that in a different spot right down here. So this is our 4-note per string intervals. Skip down to the perfect fifth. So just by skipping every other string, but then not having the tritone as part of it, we just made our major scale. And this is why the major scale is so fundamental to our music. It's the obvious steps that we would pick in order to form an interesting musical series. Now, of course, it's not the only sequence of notes we can use. If you were to play the major scale on top, and in the next line down, play the Dorian interval, that's our Mixolydian scale. So I snuck in there two different modal names, the Dorian and the Mixolydian. But you get the idea. We can shift where those half steps or those single fret steps sit and make interesting things in music. And this leads us right into discussions on modes. And this kind of an approach makes modes, of course, very easy to understand, as long as we kind of pay attention to the way we're putting the sequences together. But what if we go really far astray? Folks love to make wild and weird names for musical ideas. Some of them I can barely remember. One of them that I can remember is the idea of a harmonic major. And the idea of a harmonic major is nothing more than our Ionian scale on top, and then starting on the fifth, play the two notes close together right away, and then play the two notes close together at the very end. So we get a scale that goes Definitely sounds different, definitely sounds good, but you can get even crazier, and this is where we really start making stuff up. What if you played the double harmonic major? Now you can sort of guess what that's going to go like. We're going to change that top string sequence to 2 close together, and then 2 close together. Come back down to the 5th, 2 close together, and 2 close together. A very interesting scale, and by some accounts it's the darkest scale that we can run into in our music. There's another name for this scale. It's something like the Byzantine scale. I think it sounds really great. I don't think it's that dark, but it's definitely exotic and interesting. But you'll notice what happened and what didn't change. We always started with our root note. We always went to our 4th. We picked up at our 5th and went up to our octave root note. So these points become great ways of referencing what we're doing. That root octave, root 4th, root 5th makes a ruler that we can use and compare any other note sequence we're working on and understand what the implications are, because it's a pretty good ruler, and all it really asks is what notes sound really good together, and if there's a note that doesn't sound good together, maybe we want to avoid that generally, but we know where it is in the ruler. And just a reminder, if we're starting on the note C, that perfect 4th right below it sounds great. Perfect 5th, right up 1 full step from there. And the sound that we don't like very much, that's our tritone. And it's not that we don't like it and we can't use it, it's just the least consonant, the least sounding good note. And so if we wrap this all up, we've got a really nice little ruler, just reminding ourselves that that root 4th, 5th octave becomes a great metric for us to gauge all of our other notes against it. And kind of as a neat little aside, if you think about that root position and 4th, there is only 4 notes in between, and we almost always will have 2 notes in there. So there's just not that many patterns available to us staying within this 12-note scheme and our 8-note key or major scale type development. Kind of cool stuff, right? It's a great cheat code for learning our music and getting some good references.